There he is. I've just told you all about him, and I just told him all about what's been going on with me on the internet. Trae Crowder on the podcast. Very excited to have you. Big fan of you, as you know, and love what you guys are doing. Back on tour. Congratulations. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, good to be here, man. You really dropped a bomb on me right before we started with that story of your travails with right-wing Twitter and twerking children. That's truly unfortunate. I'm lucky, I guess, in that so far, or typically for me, it's like private messages that I get, some of which have been pretty brutal. I mean, I've gotten death threats. I've had dudes literally threaten to rape my wife. So, pretty horrific.
That's pretty bad.
But usually private messages or just in the comments, they'll just like call me a stupid liberal queer or whatever and then go about their day. I haven't been full on brigaded like you have.
Ben Shapiro tell the internet that Pete Dominick's a pedophile. So, I mean, it's not such a...
I mean, is there any part of your, look, pedophile, that's a rough road to hoe right there for sure. You're getting accused of that even by lunatics.
Yeah.
But like, is there any part of you that's like, that old saying, any press is good press or whatever, where it's like Ben Shapiro's this huge mouthpiece and he's talking shit about you. So maybe some people will be like, well, then this Pete Dominick guy, he must be okay. If Shapiro hates him, he must be all right. Have you thought about any of that at all?
Over my career, I've had several pretty decent hits, quick hits from things I said on TV or things people said on my show. And I've come out looking really good. So I've never been through anything quite like this. And this is kind of funny because I wasn't on anybody's platform. I just like wrote a tweet while I was in my garden, and then 5 minutes later, I'm I'm a pedophile, according to like thousands of people, and so I never had anything like this, and so it's hard to know. It's a great question on the one thing I care about, like not necessarily how is this good for me. It's always good to be talked about, but like being called a pedophile, like that attaches to stuff, and those comments are forever.
Yeah,
question. So I haven't seen anything so far. There hasn't been anything that I think is like permanent damage, but I don't think there's not really any good that comes out of it. And it hurts me. My daughters know about it. They've been, they're threatening my daughters. They don't know who my daughters are or anything. I don't think they're going to show up.
So ironic. You know what I mean? Like they're just so immune to irony, these people, that they're so upset at you for being a pedophile. They say that they're going to, assault your young daughters.
To be fair, most of them are worried about my daughters, Trae. They're worried that I'm their father. And I'm sensitive enough that a complete stranger doesn't know anything about me or my character, my parenting, my dedication to my kids, which is a really important part of my reputation that anybody knows. But it still bothers me. I can't.
Of course. Yeah.
Would it? I mean, what's gotten to you? What is your career? You're a blood trader, as man.
Yeah, I am. It's so not even a comparison, and I feel silly saying this, but like truthfully, because I haven't had anything like that happen to me, thankfully, from these people. The only thing that
by the way.
Do what?
I gave them your number and
I appreciate it. Yeah. I can text me, holler at me. Yeah. The only things the things that have always like pissed me off the most is when people, when haters online say that I'm a fraud, like that it's all fake.
Yeah.
That drives me up the wall because it's like, ain't nobody gonna tell me I ain't white trash. God damn it. You know what I mean? Like it's honestly a very redneck thing to get upset about. Do you know what I mean? Like to say all these other horrible, but very garden variety things.
Well, it denies the journey that you've been on your whole life.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It
denies your origin story. Your accent is fake. Everything about you can't be one of us. They're saying that you can't have had the life that you had, and then I guess hold the views and say the things that you do.
Yes, right, absolutely. The funniest one of those was this dude who was like going around in comment sections and trying to tell people he'd like, I guess, self-concocted this conspiracy theory, but he was telling people that I was actually a liberal New York Jew actor who was who was high. Yeah, I've been. I guess I have some sort of Jew attributes,
You
I
look like a
suppose.
handsome Jewish guy to me.
Yeah, which is fine. Actually, like my own fans in Jersey, I do shows in Jersey.
Yeah.
Like in the Q&A afterwards, be like, I gotta say, you don't look much like a redneck. You look like a Nebuchadnezzar Jew. That's what I would think if I just saw
right.
you.
Or an Italian, even. You could pass for a lot
Yeah.
of things. But anyway, so I interrupted you.
And that I was hired by the Obama administration to like infiltrate and spread liberal propaganda in rural America. That was the most elaborate conspiracy theory about my fraudulent origins, but also like people like more stereotypical rednecks, like from back home, even they wouldn't do it on the internet. I just hear they were like talking shit at the dollar store or whatever, but it still annoyed me where they would be like, you know, Trae wasn't the damn, you know, he was the least.
What aisle were they? Paint the picture, Trae.
Oh, probably somewhere near the, like, you know, canned cheese, the brick wall of Velveeta or Boone's Farm, somewhere between those two.
There they are. Yeah, I got
canned meat, you know, potted meat, big hit back home. But they saying that like Trae was like the least redneck one in our class or whatever. And like the thing is, that is true. But what they don't understand is that I'm the most redneck person that people in my neighborhood in Burbank have ever met. Do you know what I mean? Like it's all relative. Like, yeah, I was the book reading, you know, nerdy kid at in Celina, but my accent is much weaker or whatever now than it was when I was growing up. That like back then, I literally talked like this. Like my accent was like way thicker, and I got made fun of for sounding proper, for like talking proper, for using big words and enunciating and stuff. So it's like it's just all very relative. But as a comedian, the thing that always pissed me off the most is when people would try to say that I was faking, and they just straight up make things up. They would get in the comments and be like, "I've known this guy since we were 8 years old, and he's the most racist dude you've ever met in your life." They used to say, you know, all the hits from the racist catalog in terms of slurs or whatever, which is just like, I mean, it's literally, I know that this is a person who's just making something up. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And then saying it, and you can do that on the internet.
I've been called a pedophile for the last 40 years.
I know, right?
It's more of an interpretation, to be fair.
I was about to say that, like, it's ridiculous that they've done that to you, but like it didn't literally just happen one morning out of nowhere. I mean, again, the leap they made to get to Pete Dominick as a pedophile is absurd, but it wasn't fabricated whole cloth out of just thin air. Do you know what I mean? Like by someone, like you didn't just wake up and this was just a thing that started happening. You know, well, it did talk shit about this lunatic asshole who needed shit talked about him, but then his fans came after you for it.
Yeah, after he told them to, basically. But I also learned, I mean, in another way I was asking for it, because what I've recently found out is several of the clever ones with graphic skills took a few letters out of the name Pete Dominick, and it does spell pedo. If you take a few letters out. So they shared that and changed my profile picture to Jeffrey Epstein. And I think that's creative. Like, I'll give both of them some points for, you know, coming up with
are these people trying to, like, you know, like you said, those are kind of funny and creative, still horrible, but you know, at least they're trying. Are most of the, like, I don't know, are they just flaming you and they are aware of that and like having fun with it, or are they like trying to take you down because they believe you to be a pedophile? You know what I mean?
I think there's, from what I can tell, they are, a lot of them authentically believe that I am something, but and they're mostly actual people. I don't think these are bots. I think these are actual people with mostly burner accounts, but they're people typing into a computer, and then their tweets are all protected. They don't tweet. They just are there to go after people. And I'm talking to somebody tonight after I get done with you, who's an expert on all this. So I'm going to ask them all these questions that you're asking to try to understand the motivation and the organization, because they're organized on the dark web like a 4chan. I've learned a little bit about it. And then some of them just don't care about anything. They're young losers with no friends.
Yeah.
And they legitimately, like, when we looked for things that were, you know, I grew up in a pretty redneck town myself in upstate New York, and we didn't have a lot to do. And so we did things that got us in trouble. We did something worse than what they're doing in a way, which was we threw shit at cars.
Yeah.
Like snowballs and like soft food, like not rocks, but
eggs. Did you egg car? Egging cars was a huge thing in my hometown, but on Halloween specifically, not
we did
necessarily
it
the
on
rest of the year.
Saturdays.
Yeah, right.
And they would get out of the car and they would chase us through the cornfields in the woods, and it was horrific. It was we did that for our entertainment. It put them in their lives in danger. That's what I look at. It's almost equivalent. These kids, they're just sitting in their basement. They got no friends. They're looking for something to do. They have no idea who I am. They see a blue check. They see other people. They're in the dark web. They're probably these kind of guys that, hate women. They're incels, and they just boom, boom, boom. And they don't know anything about who you are or what you said. They're just, call him a pedophile. This will be fun. I don't even know this guy.
Yeah. Is it one of those, do you know, like you mentioned 4chan, and I know they're maybe not necessarily literally coming from 4chan, wherever they're coming from, but I know that 4chan in the past has done like coordinated campaigns that are like silly things, like Pitbull will have an online contest to see where his next concert's going to be, and 4chan will brigade it. And now he's got to go to small town Alaska to do a concert, which, by the way, he went there and rocked the place. I'm not a Pitbull fan, but I always respected that. Or like some municipality is renaming a boat and 4chan gets a hold of it, and now it's Bodie McBoatface, like those types of things. Is this like a darker version of that's happening to you?
Yeah. Exactly. It's 5,000 people in a chat room. Let's all go do this now and have an effect and ratio this person. It's exactly what it is. You actually use the word I haven't even heard yet, brigade it. And I'm sure that's a thing. And so I really don't know. I'm having a guy who covers this stuff for a living explain it to me tonight so we can all kind of understand better. But let me get back to it, because I know I don't have you forever and I can talk to you forever about my problems. But I just want to learn a little bit more about your life, because I think it's a really important lesson to come from where you came from and develop the views that you did. And I want to understand it better. So you grew up pretty poor, right?
Yeah. Oh, dirt poor. Describe
it.
Well, okay. Actually, not originally, but I was so young, I don't really remember it. So like when I was a little kid before the age of like 9 or so, and my parents got divorced when I was 7, there was pain involved. But in terms of money, when I was a young child, like my grandpa owned a car lot, my dad owned a video store, my maternal grandmother had a cafe on the town square, my openly gay uncle had a deli on the town square.
Where is this? Sorry.
Celina, Tennessee. It's tiny. It's no traffic lights, no McDonald's. It's very, very small.
There's been a lot of gay men in that town at that time.
No, not openly, but my uncle was one, and he had a business on the square, and it was doing fine. They were all doing fine. It's like a family of small business owners, basically. And what happened, and it didn't just happen to us, it happened to the whole town, was when I was about 9 or 10 in the mid-90s, the factory, the big clothing factory that was like the beating heart of the town's economy, left and went to Mexico. I know that's like sort of a false narrative a lot of times now, but like this particular factory literally went to Mexico in the mid-90s, and it just devastated the town's economy completely. And by the time that was when I was like 9. By the time I graduated high school, all of those businesses were closed. My parents were divorced. My mom was strung out on pills and in prison. Both my grandfathers were dead. And like, it was, again, that was a common theme for the whole town at large. Not super funny, this origin story, but that's how it went. And so for the bulk of my childhood that I can remember, we were like, dirt poor, and in a very redneck, middle of nowhere, rural town to boot. And that town has never recovered, by the way, Celina. It's had like double-digit unemployment ever since. We'll be going on 25 years now. And also, in terms of politics, back for a long time, Clay County, that's the county it's in, was actually a blue county in most elections up until 2008. Don't know what that was about, but it was like a blue county. It really was. You go back and look, Gore won it. And, going back years.
White county, I mean.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's funny because there is a black community there, but it was definitely an Obama thing. But either way, then in 2016, Clay County briefly made like regional headlines for being carried by Donald Trump in the primary by a larger percentage than any other
Oh,
like
wow.
race up until that point. So like it was a hard shift, you know, and that's sort of how it is
It sounds
now.
like a great town to profile what happened and why and when and because that's a major shift in
Well, it's funny you say that. I've always said that too, that it was like a, you know, an interesting case study in that whole dynamic, which is why I was always like quick to point out that it's a little more complicated, the whole Trump thing, than people acted like it was, you know, because of my hometown and how that all worked out. But so I produced and I'm also in this documentary that's out called Inherent Good. And it's about universal basic income, but it kind of uses my hometown of Celina as like a kind of case study or framework within that, you know, area, like making the case for why it would be beneficial to places like that. So, yeah.
Wow. When did you leave that town? How did you develop your views? Like, when did that all happen?
I mentioned that my uncle was openly gay. That's my dad's brother. My dad passed away in 2013, but my dad raised me. Him and my mom got divorced. We lived with my dad. My dad was like a single father. Like I said, my mom got hooked on that was the other thing. The factory left, and that's when Oxycontin showed up. Like that happened at the same time, you know. And again, that happened to all kinds of towns like that. And so my mom got lost her job at the factory and got on pills. And so my dad like raised us. His only brother, his only sibling, my Uncle Tim, was gay. And I think because of that, my dad didn't go to church. So we didn't go to church. My dad was always a Democrat and like pretty progressive. And he may have been that way anyway, but I definitely think him having a gay brother is like what contributed to that. But he raised us. And so honestly, I was kind of raised to be that way. A lot of other like small town Southern liberals that have met Corey and Drew, the guys I tour with, are examples of it. My wife is an example of it, are like the black sheep of their family. You know, they're from like more typical conservative families and they're like, they rebelled against it or whatever. But that's not really the case for me. I was kind of raised to be the way that I am, but it was still special circumstances, you know.
Can you talk about your wife? And
yeah, she's from Waynesboro in Wayne County, Tennessee, which is 5 hours away on that's the southwest part of Tennessee. Celina is like the north middle part. And they're both, but like culturally, it's the exact same town. I mean, it's tiny, middle of nowhere, red as hell. And her whole family, other than her, they all live within a 5-mile radius of each other right there in Wayne County and have for generations, you know. And my in-laws, her mom and dad, and my sisters-in-law, she's got 2 sisters, they're all, you know, we get along and they're good. They're reasonable, but they are, I think, would tell you they're conservative. They're like, they don't talk about politics really for the most part. But like her extended family, cousins and aunts and uncles and stuff, I mean, a lot of them are hardcore right wing, and it's a very right wing town. And so, like I said, she's like the black sheep. It's very much checks out for all them that she married this, you know, pretentious, artsy dude who took her to California or whatever. You know what I mean? Like it all tracks.
What they think of you. It's got to be one of those tougher things too, as you get more and more successful, more and more well known, and you're on big TV shows, you're on TV. I wonder if they're torn between wanting to brag about you and not because of what you're actually saying.
My family definitely brags about me a lot. My in-laws, I don't think they're very torn. I think I get along well with them, but I don't think they are, you know, that they have much of they don't have to push back on some desire to brag about me at the dollar store. I think they mostly just don't talk about me. Other people will bring me up to them. I know, like I went to her younger sister's wedding a few years ago, and my mother-in-law afterwards said, that there were many people there who could not believe that I did not burst into flames immediately upon entering that church, you know. like they definitely all know who I am and my whole deal and are not into it in her hometown. But
I think
whatever.
You got yourself a new sketch. I can't believe you haven't done that. Yeah. It's going to take a little bit of special effects, but you walking into a church and bursting into flames.
Yeah.
Is
man.
That they probably believe now can happen. So yes. I think that it's really interesting whenever someone, can come from a town like this and have the story that you have and views that you have. But I've always thought it was pretty simple about what would happen in our country and what does happen, which is your town, in this case, is hollowed out because the main employer leaves and moves to the country. And then all of the people are told a story that probably dominates as to why. That's the case for every town in America and every country in the world, really. And usually the case that gets told in this one is by some right winger on AM radio back then, or now a podcast or YouTuber or Fox News or any of these other networks, or the president of the United States and conservative politicians. What is the story that they believe as to what hollowed out that town and why it's never come back? Because
NAFTA and the Clintons, Bill Clinton and then also later Hillary, just the Clintons are who they mostly blame for that and blame NAFTA. And that's not entirely wrong. My whole thing is I just can't believe that they listened to Donald Trump when he told them the opposite. I know that he was telling them what they wanted to hear and they were desperate for someone to do that, to tell them what they wanted to hear. It still kind of blows my mind that they bought into it as fully as they did, though, because Donald Trump, and I've said this before, but it was so crazy to me when I first realized that he actually was catching on crazy, crazy with these people, because this isn't a theory I have. I know for a fact that if you could go back in time to before Donald Trump got into politics, before he went after Obama, when he was just the famous rich douchebag, and he had been that for 30 years. If you go back in time and interview pretty much any stereotypical redneck you could find and just be like, Donald Trump, the guy on, the rich New York guy on TV, what do you think about that guy generally? And it would have been universally negative, I promise you. Just he's a, silver spoon, blue blood Yankee who thinks he's better than everybody else, thinks he's smarter than everybody else, and needs his ass whipped, runs his mouth too much. That type of thing is what they would have told. He's the antithesis of most of the things that they, appreciate in a man.
If anything that appealed to them, if any part of your theory is wrong, the thing that did break out and it appealed to them was that he was a tough guy. He was a tough guy, which is also weird for any redneck or actual tough white guy to think, because he was a fat orange person with wild hair. Nothing was ever actually tough. He'd never sweat. He'd never bled. He probably, he faked injuries and all that. But I feel like that did cut through to some people, that he was this masculine guy who got the most attractive women, and somehow that seemed to appeal to if anything cut through and is not true of the generalization that you're making, which I think is mostly accurate, it would be that. And yet he's a fucking carnival looking person. And that didn't.
Well, I think clearly I'm wrong about a lot of that. If you just look at how it worked out, I'm just saying it's wild to me. They bought all of his bullshit, and a big part of it was, like I said, he's just saying the things they wanted to hear. He was the only person pretending to give a shit about a lot of their problems, but he was he was full of shit, very, transparently, in my opinion. But obviously a lot of people just fully bought it, and now they've drunk the orange Kool-Aid at this point, or just pretty far gone.
What's the last 4 years of your life been like? What was your comedy, tour like and performances like during the Trump era? You guys were mostly together, but also doing, your own individual dates. Who comes out? Who are your fans, especially in the last 4 years? What has your act been like? Because comedy during Trump has been, unique in a lot of different ways. I feel like you're well known enough and have enough of a following that people know what to expect. Did you ever surprise people? What's it been like on stage?
I think that I always felt
everything else.
I always felt like, and I still feel like, I haven't been on stage in over a year. I had one show in LA, but anyway, who knows what my comedy's going to be like now. Hopefully it's still good. We'll find out before too long. But I always felt that if you liked my videos and stuff, if you liked all that, you would also like my stand-up, because it's very much in the same vein. You know what I mean? I would invoke Trump's name here and there, but I definitely wasn't up there doing topical political jokes or ragging on Trump the whole time. But I would talk about Trump's people or Trump America and make fun of them and make fun of that, that type of thing. I definitely it was like a lot of social commentary and like had a political bent to it. But not just, like I said, not just, 45 minutes of Trump jokes. In terms of who would come out, it depends on where we're at. In the South, it's a lot of like-minded people, other like liberal Southerners, and they come in from the woodwork too, man. Like out rural people, which is awesome in my opinion. I love that. And then in other parts of the country, it's usually one of two people. It's either people who have some kind of connection to the South or are like transplants from the South, or there's also a type of person who's like just, a liberal who's like, I get into the novelty of it all. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, this is neat. Do you know what I mean? Like a Portland liberal who doesn't have any connection to the South is just like, this is a neat, fun thing that, whose values I agree with or whatever. So that's kind of the makeup of our crowds. Mostly white people, which, I wish it was more diverse. I love the white people that come to my shows. But yeah, I'm not going to lie to you. Well, I wish it was a little more of a multicolored tapestry in the crowd there.
One of the best crowds, really. I mean, if you can win over a black crowd as a comic, there's nothing.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I'm not just as a white comic. I mean, black comics too. I mean, the black crowd, you take that if they go for the ride with you.
Oh yeah, man, that's the best.
Yeah.
But yeah, and Corey and Drew are the same way. I think like we all kind of play in that general field of like progressive Southern humor. Like that's the thread that runs through it all, for sure. But we don't exclusively. We'll talk about our marriages or whatever, my kids every now and then. I do some of that stuff too. That more kind of just like.
Since you brought that up, I want to ask you now, and then we'll get back to some of the other things I've written out a script that I want to ask you about.
Right.
No, I always like to talk to guys about guy stuff about parenting. I hate that parenting is a conversation that is mostly had, by women. I love talking about parenting and learning from other guys. So my general question often is like, what kind of dad are you? What's your relationship like with your boys? Your sons are, what'd you say, 9 and 11? No,
8 and 9.
8 and 9, very close in age.
Yeah, 13 months apart. Yes.
Which one do you have a preference? Do you love more?
No, you know how that goes.
Sure.
Yeah, but we can't. No, they're both great. I'm a big, fully transparent here, I think. So like I said, I was raised by a single father. My dad, like looking back on my dad now, my dad made me the man I am. I love my dad very much. He loved us very much. But I look back on it and I have like some criticisms now of his parenting. And it was mostly that like, he was kind of more of like a friend. He was not a disciplinarian. Now, luckily, I was just like me and my sister both, for the most part, were like good kids. So maybe he didn't have to crack the whip all that much. But like, I mean, he pretty much just let us do whatever the hell we wanted to, frankly. And I look back on that now and I'm like, yeah, I don't want to be like that. But if I'm being honest, my wife is a disciplinarian in our relationship. I'm not that kind of like strict dad. I love to play video games with them and, watch Marvel movies and all that type of shit. Like I like to have fun with them, but I don't let them walk all over me or nothing like that. But I don't, I'm not strict at all, to the point that like, I often feel like I need to do a better job of that,
How much do you get a lot of time with them because you're on the road a lot, but do you
not anymore. Or
the last year has been,
yeah, for the last year, I've been with them like every day, which is cool. I mean, I have appreciated, because I did tour a lot and I was away from home a lot, but I would like fly out every weekend and fly home every Sunday or Monday. You know what I mean? So like I would see them I wouldn't be gone for weeks at a time, but I would be gone like almost every week for at least, a couple of days or whatever. And that started to wear on me because it's hard for me to be away from them. But then the pandemic happened and I've been, spent a lot of time with them over that. And I'm hoping that will kind of like build up a reservoir of, a quality time reservoir or something. Cause I'm very much looking forward to getting back on tour, but that is like happening soon. So, and we'll see. I don't know what to expect in terms of that part how much I'll like miss them or how hard it'll be to be away from home. Will it be like, because I got so much time with them, it's like, it'll be fine, you know, or will it make it harder? I have no idea. I guess we'll find out, but I'm very lovey-dovey and oversensitive about them, you know, like I said, I talk about them in my act. I do a little bit, but I don't like talk shit about them or make fun of them. Really. I might tell stories that involve them, but I don't make them the butt of the jokes or anything like that. I'm also not at all into that whole like premise of, you know, kids are like youth vampires or fun vampire. Like the kids ruin your life, basically. You know, that all like comic things like don't have kids if you want to, you know, still go to concerts or whatever, like that whole thing. Like I don't buy into that at all and never do that type of material either.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. It sounds like you're similar type of dad as I was. I mean, and when my comedy career really lifted off, and you know, the goal was just to really, I guess I didn't have more ambition than being a headlining comedian and having kind of a body of work. And when it happened for me that I was headlining across, you know, at some decent clubs across the country, I was like, this is it. And then there I was in El Paso on a Thursday night at a La Quinta Inn, and my daughter was 6 months old, and I was like, it's not it. It's actually not it. I love comedy. This is where I wanted to be, but now I want to be home, which is when I basically decided to try to get, you know, how can I make a living in entertainment with comedy and not have to leave? And I got jobs as a warm-up comic, you know, Colbert Report and on Sirius XM, and then I could just kind of stay home a lot more. And it was a priorities thing. It was hard. But,
I mean, I've been trying. I'm also doing this just because I very much so want to do this, but I've been trying for years now to get like a show on the air. I've had like 5 pilots that didn't go, you know, and I'm trying to.
Oh, that's so hard.
It's insanely hard. Yeah. People don't.
You get so close.
Yeah.
And nowadays it's even harder than it was when I started. In the 90s, they were handing out, you know, holding deals and even more and huge amounts of money. And I don't know what the money's like now, but like to get a pilot is so hard. And because you just sit there and you just imagine what might very well be. And you get really close. It's so close. So that's I mean, it's both amazing and super impressive, and also my heart goes out to you having, you know, so close to exactly that kind of big money and you know, period of time like
they do still have those deals you're talking about. I mean, I got one of those, but I just know from hearing other people talk about it and stories and whatnot that it's like those deals now are, I mean, a fraction of what they were in the 90s. You know, like they were crazy in the 90s, man.
Oh yeah.
I want to do that like creatively, and I always have, but also a huge plus of that for me would be not having to travel as much. Again, I'm dying to get back on the road at this point after the last year, but yes, I would love to have something set up that's more, you know, where I don't have to leave as often.
Right.
But I would still do it though. I mean, I would still tour it to some degree.
I still do it. I mean, if it were easier, you know, to get certain type of quality gigs, I'd probably do it even more. But so let me ask you how, you know, the last year has been. I mean, how did COVID treat you and watching, you know, the election last summer? I mean, it felt like on the edge every day, so much pressure and fear and concern about, you know, the way that the election was going in a historic pandemic. How did you deal with that?
Not particularly well, but it could have been a lot worse in terms of how I dealt with it. I mean, I got pretty depressed and everything. I mean, it was, you know, a lot of dark periods, like a whole lot of us had. But yeah, like you said, last summer, man, I mean, it was because I don't know if it's because I have kids or what, but I generally am ultimately optimistic actually about the future for the most part. I think at the end of the day, we tend to move in the same direction, you know, ultimately, which is forward. But last summer, though, that was like the first time that I really in my head started to think like, is this the beginning of the end here? Like, is this all crumbling? Like, I'm really here for this, like the dissolution of this empire or whatever, the downfall of civilization. Like I started having thoughts like that. And then also in terms of like career stuff, not being able to tour and all that type of thing, it's just like, is all that over too? Like what just is everything over? Oh my God, what if everything's over? And it was, you know, it was, it was dark for sure. I think the only thing that staved it off the other thing is when the pandemic first started, over the first few months, because I could pack it on like nobody else, I probably gained like 25, 30 pounds because I got into baking, and that didn't help. I still bake now, but since then, so for like over the past year or so, I've lost like 50 pounds.
Yeah, to me, you look like super, like in great shape right now.
Well, because I've been honestly working out like a maniac.
Take your shirt off.
No, we ain't gonna do that. It's not. You don't want. Nobody wants that. It's not. I'm not there yet. Hey, maybe you have me back on in a few more months or something. We'll see. Maybe I've gotten there. I'm just not quite there yet. But my wife
considered it. But the reason you didn't do it is because you don't feel like you're ready.
I'm not ready yet. Hey, I was a fat kid, dude, growing up. My weight
really?
Yo, yeah, fat kid.
What did that mean?
Fat nerd, dork kid.
Wow. So did you have even have friends, a group of friends?
I was funny. So yeah, I had friends. I was actually, my friends were like the popular dudes.
Yep.
The homecoming king and the quarterback and all those guys were like my buddies because I was the funny guy, the fat dorky funny guy,
Got it.
So yeah, I still had friends and everything. But so anyway, my wife got a Peloton at some point in the pandemic, and I didn't want it. I was like, no, that's because she was getting it for her, and I was like, you ain't gonna use it. And seriously, when she first got it, I swear I started using it almost out of spite because I was like, somebody's gonna use this damn thing. You know what I mean? Like it ain't gonna just sit there. Somebody's gonna use it.
Yeah.
So I started using it, just riding it angrily, like I knew her ass wouldn't use this or whatever. But then I just kept doing it, and I got Peloton's become like a CrossFit culty type thing. Mm-hmm. I'm not one of those dudes. Not like, wearing shirts that say, grind now, shine later, and that type of thing. You know what I mean? Like those little catchphrases they all have. But I got really into it and was doing it. I mean, I do it literally every day, and I have for
where you're on a program with other people.
Well, you can do it with other people, but you can also just do the classes on demand, which is what I do. So it's like a virtual instructor and you're on a stationary bike, but they've got other classes. So like I ride the bike every day and I alternate that on alternating days. I also do either lifting weights or yoga in addition to riding the bike. So, I mean, I've been pretty good. Yeah, I've been pretty hardcore about it. And I think that is the only thing that has kept me from the precipice of absolute despair and emotional ruin over this past year.
Yeah.
I really do. If I was still fat as fuck and not working out at all or whatever, I would be in a much, much, much darker place. Cause I mean, yeah, it definitely has messed with me, for sure.
It messed with everybody in all kinds of different ways. Right. And I think it's super important I love what you just told me. I think when we share like whatever I did, whatever was working for me, then other people can hear that and be like, let me give that a shot. That's good. I'll use that. And no matter what it is, it could be something you never heard of or something that seems routine. So that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that with me, and good luck. Keep up the good work. What is your weakness with the baking? Is it bread? Is it sweets?
Well, so here's what happened. I got
one of those people that learn to make bread.
All right. We'll get back to that in just a second because I thought this was pretty funny how that played out, the whole bread part of it all. But pretty early on in the pandemic, I don't even remember why, I finally decided to check out the Great British Baking Show on Netflix.
Okay.
Right?
All right.
In the years since then, I have watched the entire series three times over and continue to watch. I'm obsessed with that show.
Okay.
I heard an English comic say that like when he hears Americans talk about that show, it sounds like they're talking about opioids or something. It's like, oh, it's just a warm blanket. It's like a warm blanket of a show. And it's like, gives me a glow and I just feel nice or whatever. And
check it out.
So I've always liked to cook, but never baked. But then I started watching that show and that got me into baking, and I still bake a lot. I just don't eat it now. I bake for like the boys. So usually sweets, cookies and pies and stuff like that. I do make bread or bagels every now and then, but like when I first got into I made one loaf of bread and then I was like, I might get into bread. That's what I might do. And I got on the internet looking up like bread stuff, and I found out pretty quickly, I don't know if you know this, but it's generally accepted on the internet that getting really into bread is like a cry for help. Essentially, like the Venn diagram of highly depressed people and people who are getting really into bread is just like a circle, a single circle. Like,
why is that? I
I think it's because it's like it takes up a lot of time. It keeps you busy and you're like making something so it has value or whatever. And you can just like, you can sort of lose yourself in making bread.
About oil painting, though. I mean, like, there's got to be something about, eating it and the satisfaction of that as well. I don't know. I can't even imagine. I've never heard that. That is hilarious.
If you start getting into bread, you will run across that theory. I promise you. There's a subreddit called Breadit, and it basically doubles as a like emotional support group for depressives.
Hilarious. So let me ask you about where we're at now. I'll let you go. I'm really enjoying talking to you, Trae. It's great to see you.
Yeah, me too, buddy. I always like talking to you.
The insurrection happens, the post-election, the big lie, the insurrection, and kind of where we're at now. It hasn't been, it's better that we don't have a crazy person every day and that he's not on Twitter. I think that's a really good thing, that he's been deplatformed. I think that's actually a thing.
Huge.
But what do you think? Where do you think we're at? Where are your old friends from the old neighborhood? And when you watch, American media and what's happening with the Republican Party in terms of the way that they're voting, I mean, what do you think about? And what do you think about these people attacking the Capitol? It's still a huge deal to me.
Well, the first part of that, I guess, like I mean, it's really discouraging. I was on a podcast earlier with some other guys, and we're talking about Tennessee. And like before the last few years I lived in Tennessee, the governor was this guy, Bill Haslam, right? Mm-hmm. Super rich kid from a very wealthy, powerful family in Tennessee. And he was a Republican, but he was like an extremely moderate Republican. And the two senators were Bob Corker and Lamar Alexander, and they were like moderate. They were like old school fiscal conservative, just regular ass Republicans, right? And every now and then he was for like Medicaid expansion. He made community college free for all Tennesseans. Like there was some things that I could actually be happy about and proud of. This insane state legislature tried to make the Holy Bible the state book and has them veto. He would veto their more lunatic tendencies. He was a reasonable Republican. Mm-hmm. Right. And that's just completely gone now. Like that doesn't even exist anymore. And I think I blame Trump for it. Now we've got Bill Lee, Bill Haggerty, and Marsha Blackburn, and they are all just boogity lunatics, man. Just some of the worst ones out there in the whole country. I'm biased, but I really believe that Marsha Blackburn is
she's a demon. I'm more objective on, because the rest of the country, you're saying that because you know her better, but from a little further away. Yeah, she says absolutely batshit crazy.
One of the worst. So yeah. I hate that like they've shifted that far in that direction and are, winning and everything. One thing I try to tell myself when it comes to the Trump of it all, and I mean, I say I tell myself this, but I do believe it, but it may be more of a hopeful belief, is that like you got all these mini Trumps now coming up. They're all trying to like be like Trump. Yeah. But I don't think that they will be able to replicate that. I think Trump is a sort of like he's a generational douchebag. You know what I mean? He's like I liken it to like movies that are so bad they're good, and Trump isn't good. I'm making an analogy here. Movies that are so bad they're good. Sometimes a studio will try to purposefully do that. They try to purposefully make a movie so bad that it's good, but you can't do that. You have to be trying your hardest to make the best movie you can make, and then it is a shit show, and then it can be so bad that it's good. I think Trump is a similar type of thing politically. They're all going to try to emulate him and whatever, but you can't coach that. Like they're just going to be, shadows of Trump, I think. I don't think any of them are going to be able to invigorate the base the way that he was. And he's 75 and fat and a piece of shit and everything. So hopefully that'll just work itself out. And maybe it will just slowly kind of dissipate, because I don't think another Trump is coming. Personally.
I want to agree with you. And I used to say that and think that a lot. And now I think a little differently by terms of, we don't have another Trump coming. But what he created was this idea that you should be following a person and not an idea. And that's what you're saying, because we don't have another person who can really embody and be like he was. But what he also did was he destroyed reality.
Yes.
And so the truth. Not that anybody has they'll believe whatever they're saying. So whether it be the DeSantis in Florida, if he says, listen, I gave you the money that you got from the stimulus, I gave you that, they'd be like, DeSantis gave it to us. Anything that's bad, he'll blame on Democrats, and anything that's good, he'll take credit for it, and the truth will not matter. He's like, listen, I told that hurricane not to come in here, but the Democrats sent that hurricane. It is actually named after George Floyd. That couldn't have been us.
Well, the hurricanes come for gays. Everybody knows that. But that's the gay sex that gets the hurricanes going.
A percentage of people believe that terrible weather events are as a result of, or anything terrible as a result of whatever, quote, sins you committed. But that used to be insane. And now
I know. The thing you said, you're 100% right about how he destroyed reality. Yeah, it's just like, the thing is, it used to be, yes, there were two sides of the political spectrum and there were different people and there were some lunatics, but generally it was like some things happened. Like they really did happen. Like some things were true because they happened.
Trae, though, this is a perfect example. And like we were saying, sorry to interrupt. Yes, some things happened, but the insurrection was, it was people walking through stanchions in a line. They looked like tourists. And it's like, you were there. You ran up at your gas mask. They're literally saying that it didn't happen, that they didn't climb the walls and kill police. We all
right. No, I know. I'm saying I agree with, like, that used to be the case where it's like people on both sides acknowledged something that was just objectively true, right? And then there were matters of opinion and shades of gray or whatever. But if something was objectively true and everyone saw it, there was no disputing that. And that's not the case anymore at all. They literally just say what they want to say, and it is just believed, like swallowed whole by their base. And yeah, that is extremely disheartening. There's a lot to be worried about. I still just think, and again, being hopeful.
Yeah.
Briefly, the insurrection, that was just disturbing as hell and very alarming and upsetting and all of that. But also, they were so comically ineffectual and ridiculous in so many ways that, like, I think you can be a little optimistic about that too, almost, where it's like, look, these people are not, they're not efficacious.
Yeah, to say. Organized 3%ers in camouflage, talked about it before, had radios. There was still a guy who had a hand on the shoulder of the guy ahead of him because they were in an organized line that had to stop and be like, hold on, I'm exhausted. Like they weren't the elite.
No, they're not the elite. Exactly. But going back to, so the other thing about nothing's real anymore and these people where they're at now and where we're going in the future, I still just want to believe that the whole thing about progress happening one funeral at a time and everything. I just don't think that most Zoomers, some of them are being radicalized, I'm sure, but I just think as more and more boomers die off and young people are coming up and stuff, I don't believe that they will have the numbers to keep up. I mean, I think
that brings me to the last thing I want to talk about, which is what radicalizes new young people, Zoomers. I like that. I don't think I've even heard that. That's
what they call them.
Is media. It's less their life experience. Like these people are being, as we talked about earlier with your hometown, they're being told a story. And if Tucker Carlson is going on every night, or Ben Shapiro, or any of them, these popular guys are going on, they're creating a narrative. And it radicalizes young people, just like young Muslim men are radicalized into Al-Qaeda. Like they're just, something happens, some video, some narrative. So my question to you is, how do you handle, like, what do you think about liberal media versus conservative media? Because I was thinking about this today based on my situation. Like they came for me and called me a pedophile. There's no rules. Liberals would never organize liberal people to go destroy a person's reputation based on nothing true. We organize to like vote and to feed people and to help people in real life. And they have no principles at all.
No, they don't.
They're changing elections. And so what do you think with the kind of liberal media's influence versus conservative media? You guys seem to be doing pretty well telling your version of things, which I certainly agree with and I'm always entertained by. But where do you think we're at with media?
I mean, I think it's a shame in a lot of ways. I mean, we're comedians, right? And I do, just like when Jon Stewart went on went on Crossfire or whatever and broke down Tucker Carlson all those years ago.
Ooh,
I
so
still believe what he said at that time, which is just like, he's like, he's like, my lead in is puppets making prank phone calls. Okay. Like, it's not the same thing. And I'm standing on that because I know I'm liberal propaganda or whatever, but I'm a damn comedian. And I think it's a shame that, like, news outlets and journalism and everything has gotten so polarized and specialized, where it's just like you can just choose, like we were saying earlier, you can just choose your version of events. It doesn't matter how they actually played out. It's like nothing's objective anymore. And you can do that on either side if you want to. You could just inundate yourself with your own, inside your own bubble, and only hear things that you agree with and believe in. And I definitely think that is dangerous. I don't know. It's just hard for me to believe that enough young people will fall victim to like far right radicalization for it to not have an effect on their sort of numbers going forward. They already know. I mean, that's what gerrymandering and all these voter restriction rules and everything is about. It's like, they know that the more people who vote, the less likely it is that they will win, and that's because we outnumber them at the end of the day. It's just that they don't play by the same rules as we do. Like you were saying, they cheat to win, and they're very open about that, and they don't give a shit. And we still try to like take the high ground or whatever and not stoop to their level. And so we fucking get beat, and it's like, but I do think there are more of us than them at the end of the day. And that ultimately will matter. I have to believe that.
Yeah, I have to tell myself that too, and I want to believe that, and I think there's a lot of signs that that's true. But I think that's why we got to keep doing what we're doing, and you guys got to keep doing what you're doing. Because by the way, I worked at the Daily Show. John hired me, and then Johnny, my buddy, and then I went off to Colbert, and both those guys always tried to play down, I'm a comedian. I never bought it. They were extremely influential.
Oh, they definitely were extremely influential. Yeah. But they were not the same thing as like CNN, you know what I mean? Or like a news outlet.
Certainly not. But the idea that I'm just a comedian, like, you can't get away with that either. You're not just a comedian. You've been doing these videos for a long time. You do your stand-up act, your appearances on TV, your thoughts, your ideas. You're a thought leader. You influence the way that people think. You help them think through things, and that's awesome. And then you take, all that influence and put it towards the forces of good, like you are with this film. So I just don't buy that. Oh, you're just an entertainer, just a comedian. No, you're actually a really influential guy with a huge following. And if you went out and said something, people would trust you. They like you. They believe in you. I think
I would like to say and think and believe that they can trust me and believe me, because I do, I, even for a joke or whatever, I try not to ever say anything that I don't mean, or don't actually believe. Like, I don't pretend I try to keep it real with people, but also, and I don't present myself as I'm not reporting the news. I'm not breaking stories. I'm not a journalist. You know what I mean? Like, I give my opinions on things and try to make them funny. And I'm upfront about that. So I think I feel good about that whole dynamic as far as that goes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do, and I'm psyched to have a conversation with you, and I want to do it again. And I'm loving what you guys are doing, and excited that you're going back out on tour. And I hope to talk to you again soon and see you even sooner, man. I really appreciate you joining me here in my shed.
Buddy, thanks for having me. Like I said, always a pleasure to talk to you. I really appreciate it. Had a great time. I'm so sorry about all that shit you're going through right now. That is horrifying, but you'll weather it. You'll be all right. Can't keep some guys down. You're one of them.
Not me. That's for damn sure. Yeah. Right. But I do have to take 6 weeks off. All right.
Thanks, Pete. See ya.
Let me just hold on before you go.